It certainly was a weekend full of rugby action, so unpack it. We have SA Rugby magazine writer Dylan Jack. A very good afternoon. Good to be chatting to you here on Newzroom Afrika once again. I want to just start with the Sharks and some of the injuries that we've seen over the last 2 weeks and how that actually may impact on the Springboks. Welcome.
Yes, good morning, Valen. Good afternoon, Valen. Thanks for having me again. The Sharks in this past game, obviously they lost. Evan Etzebeth went off at half-time and Jaden Hendrickson went off in the first half against against Munster, Hendrickson certainly looks the worst of those, with his arm being slinged up while he was going off after scoring a try. Etzebeth, thankfully, seemed to be moving all right, walking around after the game freely without any sort of bad injury, it appeared. So he might be fit for this weekend's quarterfinal. Hendrickson is obviously the bigger concern over there, especially considering the depth of scrum off that the Sharks have. It's a little bit of a concern for them it would be a concern for them to lose Springbok like Jaden Hendrickson for this game.
And then we had Cheslin Colby, who was the Springboks' secret weapon in France, getting injured last week. How much of this is going to concern Springbok coach Jacques Nienaber?
Yes, I think it will be a little bit of concern. Thankfully, Colby only seems to be out. It seems to be a sprain, so he's only out for the month. But obviously, losing a bit of momentum, you never want to see your players lose momentum like that. You want to see them coming into the test season firing and picking up form for their clubs. So, of course, Jacques and Rusty Rasmus will both be keeping a keen eye on all the club action and hoping that the main players come through unscathed, because any serious injury right now, considering how close we're getting to the test season, could be sort of catastrophic for the World Cup, you know.
How do you rate the Stormers and the Sharks' chances in the next round? Because both of them are going to be away from home, something that they certainly took a lot of advantage of this past weekend.
I think they both have a fairly decent chance. The Stormers' problem has been that they haven't been as good overseas as they have been in Cape Town. At Cape Town Stadium, they've been undefeated in about 21 games, I think, or 20 games at Cape Town Stadium. They haven't been as good overseas playing in the north, but they still have a very good chance against the Exeter Chiefs side that struggled to put away a Montpellier team that was playing with 14 men for most of the game. That game went all the way through to the end of extra time. I think the Stormers, with the pack that they have a very good chance. The Sharks are obviously playing against the Toulouse team that are packed with French internationals. And it's going to be a major challenge. It's going to be a very interesting one to see how that goes, because obviously the Sharks are also packed with Springbok players. So it's almost a sort of a test match kind of atmosphere, France versus South Africa. So it's going to be very interesting to see how that one goes.
Well, let's speak about Toulouse, because they beat the Bulls and certainly nullified any kind of Bulls threat. But it's also the Bulls' sixth loss in a row in Europe. What is happening with Jake White's team?
I think in terms of the Bulls, they seem to have struggled to juggle their responsibilities between the URC and the Champions Cup, as well as the Currie Cup that has just started. They've tried to juggle the squad in between those competitions, and I think it's resulted in a bit of a lack of cohesion and lack of continuity. You've had players shifting positions constantly. You've had some of the players that have been starting in all sorts of different positions in terms of the back line, and it hasn't quite helped them form that cohesion that they had last season, where they were picking a certain sort of team and keeping that team to what they've really wanted.
Yeah, you speak about the different competitions that they're competing in the Currie Cup. It's not going any better for the Union. Is this maybe an indication of a wider problem?
Maybe it could be. Honestly, I wouldn't know, but I think one of the things that they also have to look at is hiring a full-time defense coach. I think last season the defense was one of their major strengths, and this season it isn't going as well. They have a lot of soft moments. I think they were good in the first half against Toulouse defensively, and then again they let in a couple of soft tries and they kind of fell apart from there. The game was done. I think that's another area they're going to have to look at is, I think they lost their defense coach, Joe Mongalo, at the beginning of this season. At the end of last season, they lost him. He went down to the Sharks to become the Currie Cup head coach. And I think that's definitely had an impact on their performances this season. They haven't quite been that same sort of defensively solid team that we saw last season. So that's something that they're going to have to look at seriously at the end of the season.
For a lot of the major unions, it's also been a experimental season because they've never had to compete in so many competitions, so many prestigious competitions, and factor in all of the travel to and from Europe. How do you think, or which team do you think has really got it right and really set a good blueprint?
Well, I think the Stormers have honestly done very, very well in terms of juggling their teams this season. The fact that they lost a lot of their sort of Springbok front row, the Stephen Kitshoffs and the Frans Malhabs, they lost Marvin Ori for a month with those guys going over to the Springbok training camp, and yet they stayed they maintained their continuity throughout that period. They were very, very consistent, and they looked like they might just finish in the top 2 or top 3 again in the URC, which would be a very big statement from them, despite losing some of these players, your Damien Willemses as well, going over, missing a month of action, sometimes even more when they've been on Springbok duty. And they've managed to stay consistent. I think they've really shown South African teams how to manage their resources, and they've done it really, really well.
Dylan Jack from the South African Rugby magazine, thank you so much for your time here on Newzroom Afrika.